This is Steve Bonoff, and I'm president of Printing Industry Midwest. And this is not where I thought I'd be hosting this meeting from today. I thought we'd be all together in one of our three locations, either in the Twin Cities, in Omaha or Des Moines. And I thought I got rid of my home office 2 years ago that I spent 7 years in. And I was really done with it, but I'm back, as many of you are, if you're able to be. And if you're at a print service provider facility, thank you for keeping the engines of our industry moving. I've interestingly had a number of conversations over the last few days with our members, and I'm seeing a variety of course, scenarios for companies as they look forward over these next few weeks. Some of our companies are actually doing fantastic, where they are servicing pharmaceuticals and they're making labels for things that we need in this kind of environment. Or interestingly, they have trying to look for an opportunity. They have looked back through their CRMs and seen where customers have shifted their printing to China, and they're going out and getting them back into the United States. Or they're going to their current customers and say, hey, people are home, they're not going out. Have you considered beefing up your marketing to get people to your website versus to your brick and mortar? So those are kind of the innovations that are going on right now, that people are switching on a dime and making sure that they are keeping business coming in through the door and keeping their employees fully employed. So I know that's not going to be everyone. Some people might have a full retail POP marketplace, and that would not be the place to be today. But for many companies, they're on today's call because they want to be as responsive to their customers as possible. And that's why I'm a huge advocate of what Karen's going to be talking about today. Vertical market selling is really the key today, is understanding the needs of your customers to the point where you can speak their language. You know what kind of business they're in, what success looks like for them, and what kind of printer they're using, what kind of communications are they doing, and where can your competencies actually make a difference specifically in their world. So to do that, you really need to own some verticals, and you got to figure out which are the verticals that are right for you, because just because they might be buying a lot of print, they might not fit your particular competencies. So that's what we're going to hear about today. Karen is an expert at Key Point Intelligence. Used to be InfoTrends. This is really the cornerstone of research in our industry. They do it almost better than anybody else, and you can really trust the data that they report because it's really tried and true, case study driven. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen. We're going to have about a half hour or so of real, intelligence. We're going to hear about how you can do this in your operation, and then we're going to bring on a couple panelists who are out there in the buying community, and you can learn kind of how that they interact best with their print service providers, and then we'll bring it back all together again, and we'll have some time for Q&A. And one other thing before I turn it over, I just want to let you know, tell your CEOs and your finance executives, next Wednesday, we're switching up our Finance Executive Council meeting. We're going to have a topic on really making sure that your company is poised in a downturn and how you can react right now to the COVID-19 issue. So next week, Wednesday, Financial Executive Council, we'll be sending a note out, so please watch for that. So in the meantime, I want to turn it over to Karen. Thank you so much for being here. If anybody has any questions, any problems, just chat them into us and we'll take it from there. So Karen, I turn it over to you. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely, thank you. And I really liked your comments, because I received a couple notes this morning from some people I've worked with in the past that said, I've got time now, salespeople. What was it that you said about my LinkedIn profile I need to change? So people are taking time to really refine their messaging and figure out how they can better help their clients. And so, making lemonade out of lemons, I guess, is the best approach. And so I think today's conversation is very timely. It will allow folks that have joined us today to think a little bit differently maybe about their business, or maybe refine some of the practices that they're already doing that support this approach. So we're going to talk about a vertical market approach. And interestingly enough, I've had a couple of people ask me, well, what about a horizontal approach? Why does it always have to be vertical? So if you think about a vertical market approach, the real value here, and is exactly what you said, Steve, is you get to know that environment, and it's really is serving a specific set of people and their industry needs. And so there's nothing wrong with a horizontal environment. In fact, we'll look at what that looks like here in just a moment. But the value that we see in a vertical market approach is exactly what you said, is learning that industry, knowing what the regulations are, knowing what that conversation needs to, what conversations need to take place with their customers in order to influence their products to be bought, sold, or utilized. So it's a very strong approach. We happen to know, as you mentioned through our research, that those that are following a vertical market practice in their print shops have a much higher growth rate than those that don't. So the information you're seeing here on the screen indicates that of those in the high growth category, and the way we categorize high growth print service providers are those with double-digit growth, so 10% or higher growth year over year. And those that are taking a vertical market approach, 63% of those have practiced vertical markets, whereas the declining PSPs, those that are not seeing growth and actually seeing revenue decline, only 35% of those have taken that vertical market approach. So the value in the data that you see here is really that causation correlation. And what we look for is, beyond just the vertical market approach, obviously there's other factors that are adding to those growth indicators. And so when we build down into what a vertical opportunity is for a print service provider, what we're looking here is typically they're going to see improved margins because they become a subject matter expert in there and they know how to get this, print done very efficiently and effectively. They're going to see higher revenues because they're grabbing more of that print spend within that organization. They're going to be seen as a thought leader. So long before an organization may go out to RFP or RFQ or even start shopping around, they're going to lean into those people that are experts in that industry. And obviously, again, we're going to get a larger average order. And I think what's really overlooked sometimes is that those that are taking this approach have a lower cost of sales. And obviously, that's very, very important in today's business world. And the reason for that is the sales teams, the salespeople are very focused on where to go. They're not wasting their time calling on organizations that perhaps are not a good fit for their product set or solutions, or maybe just cannot move away from their current environment because there's no compelling event. So the people that are doing a really good job in vertical markets are having a much lower cost of sales and all the other values and benefits that you see on here. So the next obvious question then is, well, which vertical is best for me and which is the highest growing vertical in our industry for print communications? And it really is an open-ended question, and it depends because there's a lot of different areas of growth in each of these types of vertical industries that you're seeing on the screen. And there'll continue to be variations of them throughout the history of print communications. We've seen sometimes where healthcare has taken a leap over insurance and education's taken a leap over hospitality. But the important thing is that you're looking at where you can have an impact and not necessarily following the biggest leader of growth in the industry. And that's very important. A lot of people like to build their businesses based on where that growth opportunity is, but it really, if you don't have it aligned to what you do well, it could be a mistake to follow a lead on a growth opportunity that doesn't fit well within your organization. So what we know is the most efficient way to grow business, and this is something that we learned, and I think it's very relevant again in today's world, and this week's world is, back in 2008 and 2009, when we took quite a hit in our industry and across all industries, we learned that there's a real need to raise cash quickly. And so one of the ways that we internalized that for our clients is we said, let's look at where your business is today and really look at your current customers and how can you gain more business from them. And so in the event that we're going to look at a specific vertical market here in just a moment, I'll show you what that looks like. And it really does help kind of build out that conversation of, rather than trying to reinvent myself and going after all new customers all the time, let's internalize this and look at what my current customer base looks like. So which industries prevail? And what you can do is to look at your customer base and say, okay, I've got a lot of common industries in hospitality, or a lot of common accounts in hospitality. And then ask yourself, what products do they buy? You know, what services do they need? Who are the people within those organizations that you have relationships with? Who could they introduce you to? If it's a large enterprise, perhaps you're only getting a small part of that print spend. Is there an opportunity to get more print spend or more solutions in that same environment? And then what you want to do as well is, when you're starting to look at a vertical approach, is you want to determine if the buying power is centralized or decentralized. And I do have a lot of clients that love to sell to franchises. They feel that that's a great niche to go after. And the cause there is because they can go to the central location and they get a lot of print for different demographics and different geographies, which then entails a lot of personalization or a lot of versioning. So a lot of people have built a business model out of that. But if you're not equipped to manage that, maybe it's not a good solution for you. If you are, then perhaps you reach outside of your area and find other opportunities, larger opportunities, that you can go to the centralized purchasing folks and have some impact. And then also determine if you want your salespeople, sales efforts focused on more informal purchasing practice, or if they are very good, or if your organization is great at RFPs and RFQs, then you need to consider that as well, because some of the larger enterprises, especially in some of the industries that were shown on the screen earlier, do a lot of RFPs and RFQs. Again, the beauty of being a subject matter expert is you can have a lot of influence on those RFPs and RFQs long before they hit the street, and they're going to come to you for advice. So then we build it out with really looking at, you know, the industry, and then what's the revenue or employee size, and there is a correlation there between revenue and print spend, and you know, what products they buy currently, what products do they buy from you, you know, what is their strengths, why do they buy from you? So what is your competitive advantage and profitability? And this can be done in simply going back, and this is so overlooked, where we have great customers and we forget to go back and say, hey, you know, I know you had a lot of other choices out there. Why did you choose us? And that really becomes your unique value proposition. And then you can start to repeat that throughout your other efforts and gain more market share. What's their annual revenue? Who's, again, the primary contacts? And then going back to that centralized purchasing and behavioral. So this is kind of a checklist for you based on the previous chart to kind of measure against what it is that you want to focus on when you're looking at specific industries. So then what we look at are listed on the top, and the images there are the fastest growing, in order, by the way, from left to right, the fastest growing applications that we've found through our surveys and our research that are occurring in our industry. So books, direct mail, brochures, transactional print, magazines, labels, and trans-promotional print. And then down below are just some of the industries that we have spent time getting to know very, very well. In fact, a little tip here is that if you are part of the RICO Business Booster community, or the Think Forum community, or the Xerox Premier Partner community, each of those OEMs have come to Keypoint Intelligence InfoTrends and have asked us to partner with them to create vertical marketing guides for their print service providers. Not all of them have all of these guides. There'd be a various crossover between some of them, but it's a real good resource for you. And I've taken some of that guide content and included it in today's conversation. So if you don't have access to them, you'll have a kind of a fundamental outline of what is what's in the guide and how to use it. So then you look at the industries and you say, okay, insurance industry, they do books and direct mail and brochures and transactional. And the way we know that is because we've done the vertical market guides for insurance, and we know that these are some of the top primary applications. Or maybe you have a financial customer or an education customer, and the education, we know as well, do books and direct mail and brochures and magazines, and then the financial customer. So you can see how this builds out, where you can start to align the different industries, their core applications, and then determine, is it something that you can do very, very well in your organization, or do you need to fill a gap? So this was one of my favorite tools, all-time tools, still today, that we used, again, back when things weren't so bright and shiny, back in 2007, 8, and 9, and people needed to raise cash. And so we did a quick white space study. And what you do here is if you look at your customer base and say, okay, I've got a couple of insurance companies, what are they buying from me currently? And you go across the top and you list out all the services and products that you can possibly provide to your clients. And then you start making X's in the appropriate XY coordinates. And so what you'll learn by looking at this is that you have some white space in some of your accounts that needs to be addressed. And this white space is cash on the table for you. So if you do wide format and booklets and you're already doing business with Acme Insurance and you're doing their postcards and brochures, then why don't you go after the booklets, wide format, and personalization as well? So it's a real quick way to assess your spend opportunity within your current account and put together a strategy to go and capture more revenue from those same accounts, from the same people that you have relationships with. And then I promise we look at it from a horizontal standpoint. So if you look at this horizontally, you're doing a whole lot of booklets and postcards. Perhaps you should be putting together some campaigns or promotions around postcards and booklets and how you can add more value to those because you do them really, really well. And if you do them really well, they're probably very high profit products for you as well. So this is probably my favorite takeaway in any workshop that I do. Everybody gets their cameras out and takes pictures of it. You have a copy of it in your handout there. But I would encourage you, especially as things are a little bit slower on our schedules perhaps, to take some time to do this and really examine where you're getting your spend right now and where there's opportunity for more. So again, this just supports what we saw on the previous pages as far as page volume in books. And so we look at this as far as 8.5 by 11 equivalents. And what we do every year at Key Point is we will do a forecast. And so in 2018, we did one for the United States. In 2019, we did one for Western Europe. We switch back and forth every other year. So this is the most recent data we have on the applications. You can see, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of growth in books and direct mail and brochures. And luckily, what we saw in the previous slides where we looked at vertical industries, all of these apply to those industries as well. So a key opportunity to think about what you're offering currently, and do you need to expand your offerings, or do you need to partner with somebody that can help you offer some of these ideal applications for the clients? This was also done back in 2017, and what we did is a huge research project with small to medium-sized businesses. So these were not the large enterprises of 500 or more employees. These were 499 employees or less. And we asked them, what are your number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 items that in order of volume do you print? And so as you look down on the one axis where it lists out the industries, you can look across the top axis and it gives you a nice grid of the applications in order of volume. So for example, we're going to dive into the insurance industry here in just a moment. So if you look at the insurance industry, newsletters is the number 1 product that they print. Then they do a lot of direct mail, magazines, and periodicals. So again, you can see here based on industry, what you need to get very, very comfortable talking about and where you can add value to some of these products that maybe they're doing in a very static fashion. So the key though is you saw a lot of opportunity on those previous pages, and I was asked by a really nice organization in Dallas last summer. He said, okay, so I want to expand my vertical market approach, and I've got, 3 or 4 that I want to work on. And, I came in and I kind of, burst the balloon. I said, you pick one. You can only pick one to start with. You cannot be a subject matter expert in all areas of regulations and documentation to start with. You can build out other vertical industries, but really if you're going to take this approach for the very first time, you want to pick one. So in today's conversation, we're going to look at the insurance industry. And what it really means is to figure out where you can get information on the industries you're going to go after. This I happen to get from Dun & Bradstreet. We here have access to Dun & Bradstreet. If you don't have it, simply Googling, or there's a lot of statistical organizations out there that also have this information. So really understanding, what it is that they represent in our economy out there. And we'll talk a little bit more here about these different types of establishments versus independents and the carriers. But there's obviously some huge numbers here in the industry industry, which to me means there's plenty of space for newcomers or for people that want to expand in this space. And it's not always the people that have been doing it forever, it's the people that come to the table with the best ideas. And so when you think about defining the insurance industry, or in any case, any industry, you have to look at what's behind that industry. And in the insurance industry, it happens to be 3 different areas of verticals. So you've got, again, kind of breaking it down, you might want to only go after healthcare insurance, or maybe you want to go after life and disability insurance, or just liability insurance. So all of these folks, all of these categories are huge spenders of print materials, as they have a lot of different kinds of interactions with their policyholders throughout the entire customer life cycle. And so they have pretty loyal customers and a lot of need to communicate with them. So if I'm hoping that none of you have gone paperless with your insurance providers, but if you haven't, you'll realize how much of your mail is driven by insurance policies, insurance updates, and notices that they need to get into your hands timely. And so the beauty of that is then we look at those applications we were talking about, and if you look here, we've got a tremendous amount of opportunity in the applications. And so when you think about who's selling, so who you're going to call on, you know what types of products there are now, but who you're going to call on, there are insurance carriers, there are brokers, there are agents, and there's affiliates called financial groups. So a lot of the financial groups and affiliates now are also carrying insurance. If you think about travel agencies that sell insurance when you go on a trip, or if you think about banks that sell insurance for certain product lines. But look at all these different applications here, and my recommendation to you would be, if you're going to go after a vertical industry, there is this type of information available in every industry out there, is to circle the things that you do really, really well at, circle the things that you want to go to market with, and then note the things that you don't do so well, and determine if it's worth bringing somebody in to partner with you on that, or if that's an area you want to fill the gap and also offer those. Because we also know, and through our research, that the people that are adding lines of business or lines of service to their business are also reflecting a lot of growth. So those that are expanding their tool sets or their solutions are achieving a lot of growth as well. So when you think about the insurance priorities. So again, we know this we asked this of some insurance companies in a large enterprise study that we did about 1.5 years ago. And we said, what are your top priorities? And the top priorities were to improve targeting and personalization, increase market exposure, so thereby getting more sales revenue, and really having a better mechanism to not only monitor, but improve the return on their marketing spend, because a lot of waste can go out there in marketing and trial and error. So this, again, was based on some of our research. If you spend a lot of time reading about a specific industry, and I'll give you some resources to do that here as we wrap up, you'll find some very key elements of priorities of industries, either from a competitive standpoint or regulation standpoint, or things that are on their minds every day that you can help them address. So this I love, because the conversation oftentimes gets into, I like personalization, but gosh, it's too expensive, or yeah, I could do versioning, but it really doesn't, I can't justify the cost of it. And so rather than getting into cost per impression, what I like to do is what I call, in this situation, insurance math. And this could be true of any industry. It could be done in the education industry as well. But insurance companies really fare well on the personalization standpoint, because people are buying from them for a blanket of security, right? So it's a real need to have that blanket of security, which means that their customers want to know that you know them very, very well. And the number one reason why people leave an organization is either bad customer experience, or they didn't feel important to that organization. So if you think about the retention rate of 84% in the insurance industry, it's like, wow, that's really good. If all industries had a retention rate of 84%, that would reduce a churn rate. But think about it differently. So if you're talking to somebody in the insurance organization, the marketing department, and you're talking to them about doing something that's going to help with their retention rate, and they say, we've got a great retention rate. And so you talk about that, and you say, but that means if you have an 84% retention rate, you lose 16% of your customers every single year. And if you have 100 customers and lose 16 of those every year, that means the following year, the first 16 customers you onboard, you're at flat. You've demonstrated absolutely zero growth. So these are the kind of business conversations you can have when you become that subject matter expert within a vertical market that really helps you stand out. And also, by the way, makes it easier to sell value-added products like personalization and versioning. So in order to improve retention rates, again, they need to improve the customer experience. And I put a little quote in here that I thought was pretty insightful from Salesforce.com. And the reason why I like it is because there's a lot of back and forth about how customers and consumers believe their data should be used. And so it says here that research has shown that over 70% of the customers expect businesses to tailor communications, personalized communications based on knowledge gained from previous transactions. And so it really is a nice opportunity to have these types of conversations where you're not just talking about ink on paper, but really the overall intent and the focus of the industry, and then be able to put that back in a mathematical solution where it helps highlight where you can have some impact and add some value. So again, real quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I want to get to our panels here in just a moment, but when you think about the methods to communicate with customers, we did this again from a vertical market approach. And it's interesting because a lot of people know that obviously digital marketing is a huge factor in today's world, and it certainly is. But again, if you look here specifically at the insurance industry, it's equal to what's they're printing in sales and marketing materials. And so there's no excuse, there's no apology needed for print. It's just recognizing that it needs to complement that. And as Steve mentioned when he was opening the conversation, is we know for a fact that print drives people to websites, and it drives behavior at websites. And so how can you help influence that behavior once they get to that website? So some numbers for you to noodle on here and think about as far as their opportunities to help influence that online purchasing decision. So again, the questions that you need to be able to answer before you sit down and have a conversation with a buyer or a marketing person within a vertical industry is, how does a company market its products? Do they have an in-house sales force? Do they have agents or independent agents? This is aligned to insurance industry, obviously, is what degree do they depend on the insurance brokers, because some of that print communication is going to be coming from insurance brokers or carriers, and what financial services do they extend through affiliates? And then, how does a company use the internet to attract new business? Because again, that print can help them drive behavior to the internet. So these are the questions that you'd want to know going in to have a conversation with somebody in the insurance industry. What you may not know, which I think was very fascinating, and I learned this because this organization came to us 2018 and asked us to help them with some vertical market research. Facebook has a tremendous amount of content out there available on vertical industries. So if you type in facebook.com/verticals, you will find there's a lot of good data out there as well. And what we saw here in this infographic is that, again, we know that direct mail drives behavior online. And in the case of insurance companies, at least a third of them are doing their shopping online. And then 84% of those that are shopping for insurance are also looking at 2 other providers. And so there's a lot of competition. How do you stand out? How do you help the insurance companies stand out in this organization? Your messaging has to be relevant, and the referrals are key. So can you put together a referral program for them? Because they know that 80% of the influence decisions are made through referrals. So can your print communications help them gain more referrals? Again, just getting behind the business causes of what makes them tick and helping them do a better job at it. Again, another infographic from them. People want insurance buyers want that post-engagement interaction. They want to know that they're important to that organization. So what can you help your insurance providers print and do to help them feel important with recommendations or value-added services? 58% of them are willing to share personal data as long as it's used responsibly and it's used relevantly. So those are 2 key areas that people are coming to terms with. Yes, you can use my data, but don't abuse it, and don't use it to the point where you're just putting my name all over a cloud and making sure that I see my name and really has no relevance to the value that you're providing. And then again, there's no replacing human interaction, but a lot of people in this situation, are adapting to the online bots and such. And so what can you do in your print communication to help people recognize that they have 24-hour perhaps customer service available, and that would be one of the messages. So that after you know all this, you need to understand, who the decision makers are, and really look at the different work groups and how you can have a much bigger audience of buying. And I'm very excited to talk to Susan and Douglas here in just a moment and understand their job responsibilities a little bit more, and how some of these organizations influence their positions and what they're responsible for every single day. So again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because I really want to get to the dialogue with Susan and with Douglas, but just kind of give you an idea of when we tell salespeople you need to have at least 5 different contacts within a large enterprise. This is why, because a lot of influence, perhaps they're not making the final decision and doing the final research, but a lot of influence comes from different departments, whether it be in the regulatory division or customer communications. Maybe it's in product support or product management, and then the marketing material. So a lot of different areas that influence that buying decision when it comes to what type of communication they want to send out to their audience. And then in this one, we're going to shift gears a little bit, because the people that you saw in the previous slide are the people that are depending on you as a sales organization to bring them good information and to help them make the right decisions. There's a ton of research out there as far as what makes a great salesperson, and we could spend all day talking about that. But really, when we boil it down, we have this study was done in 2017, and we're very excited because Steve's going to share a new link with you. It's going to give us 2020 data on the most valued attributes of salespeople and marketing best practices. But really, it comes down to a couple different things. The people that you saw on the previous screen, the departments, the people that are making the decisions, they want it to be easy to choose you. And they also want to make sure that the process is frictionless. And we saw that also from Facebook's content. And most importantly, they want you to bring them unique ideas to help them stand out. You saw how competitive the insurance industry is. How can you help them stand out? How can you help them if they are a carrier and they have agents out there that are maintaining many lines of business and many carriers? How do you help help them have their brand stand out in the sea of agents out there? So there's a lot of areas that you can help and focus on their products and how to stand out. So again, I don't expect these numbers to change a whole lot. We asked the very same question in 2020. 3 years is not a lot of time for sales organizations to change dramatically, but for buyers to change dramatically. But this is certainly an area, if you're trying to figure out where to hone in on your sales enablement and your sales opportunities, you take a look at this list and kind of do a little checklist to see how well you stand up to it. So I promised you some areas where you can stand out and spend your time to become better informed on an industry, and certainly social media is one of them. So if you haven't engaged in social media, in Twitter and in Facebook or in LinkedIn or any of those areas, Instagram, now is the opportunity, and we seem to have a little bit more time on our hands. So this is what I did for this conversation, is I went out and I said, okay, on LinkedIn, if I were to get engaged in the insurance industry, what kinds of groups out there can I get involved in? You have to play by the rules, and I will reinforce that, because I'm in many groups where all of a sudden solicitations start occurring, and that's not what the groups are intended for. It's really for knowledge sharing and sharing insights and helping each other out. But there's a tremendous amount of groups out there. If you saw you can see it up in the left-hand corner up there. It's almost 30,000 results when I just typed in insurance. And then you take it a step further. If you have access to Dun & Bradstreet, if you don't, there's organizations that can help you have access to that. What types of insurance companies, you can really focus in on your geographical area. You can look at carriers versus agents. You can look at one location versus multiple locations. And the situation you'll see here that the way I created my search, there's 13,000 opportunities for me to have conversations with people that are providing insurance. And then certainly if you have not done this, this is usually where I ask people to raise their hands, but we're not going to do that today. If you have not set up Google Alerts, I highly encourage you to do that. I have Google Alerts, as you can see here. Maybe you can't see the small print, but I certainly do them on my company. So oftentimes I find out more from Google Alerts because I haven't gone through my own internal communication newsletter, but I'll see on Google Alerts what's going on with my own organization. I have them on myself, so I know that if I am being misrepresented out there, or if I am being represented, we can promote that through social media. I have them them on my family, sad to say, but my kids are now adult kids and very responsible. But when they were in high school, I always wanted to be sure I saw what was going on in their world, so I had them on Google Alerts as well. But you can certainly put them for a specific organization or an industry, and it just feeds into your mailbox every single day, so you don't have to go out and do the curating. It comes right to you in your email. Here is just a small list of some of the insurance industry resources that you can go to. So if you go online and look at any one of these associations, you're going to find a tremendous amount of information available to you. And it will also help you formulate your value proposition, because they're going to tell you in these associations what their focus is on. So in order to put this all together, and I'm kind of rushing through this, and I really apologize for the cadence of my conversation, but I think the real value here is for you to hear how real life customers like to engage with people like us in this industry. But really what you want to do is to look at, your team, and are you bringing value to your prospect meetings? And we have a saying at Key Point Intelligence is, would your customers pay to meet with you? And if you're not bringing value, the likeliness of them wanting to pay to meet with you is pretty slim. So what can you do to increase that value when you get to the meeting? And can you help build a business case to move away from status quo? Number one competition out there is not your competition, it's status quo. It's insurance companies wanting to do what they've always done because they've always done it that way. So you need to be able to build a business case with data, with facts, with research, with your expert knowledge on why it's important that they move away from that status quo. And then can you quantify the value of what that means? Again, doing that insurance math or that education math. What's the lifetime value of one customer, and what's it going to cost them if they lose that customer because they don't have a good customer experience program in place? And the customer experience programs are a huge conversation right now. So if you haven't taken the time to learn about CX, when we're done here today, just go ahead and Google CX, and you'll find out why it's so important and why organizations, large enterprises, are including CX platforms in their approach to market retention. So again, just kind of wrap it up, be a thought leader, making sure that you understand, what's important to them, their deadlines, their competition, understand their challenges. Please don't ask them what keeps them up at night, but certainly understand what problems they have to face on a daily basis, and then engage in that industry, as the resources that I just gave you there. Engage in the industry and become a part of the community and the group, and go out to their trade shows. Spend time in our industry as well, but spend time in their trade shows and understand what their needs are as far as print communication or communication, and it gives you a better window into how to approach their organization with better ideas. So again, there's an opportunity to, in print on demand, obviously, to optimize that supply chain. And there's a professor over in Cambridge that said several years ago that in the future, sales organizations will not be selling products and services, they will be selling supply chains. And I strongly believe that, because as our products and services become more and more aligned to each other and closely mimicking each other's solutions, that supply chain is really what makes the difference. Be quick to deliver. You'll know that in the insurance company, you can help them deliver the critical messages. So that's the value you're going to bring to them. And certainly, as we've experienced in the last couple of years with all of the natural disasters or environments where insurance companies have had to respond very quickly, you can help in that area. You can be their virtual document warehouse. And I love that term because it creates a real good visual for them, where all of a sudden it removes all of the static, dusty paper on shelves, and you're now their virtual document warehouse, being able to deliver quickly. You can enable a more proactive approach. So, oops, we have a little typo there. I'll make sure it gets corrected. In the peer pressure, they have a lot of competition. We saw that insurance buyers are looking at an average of 3 organizations when they go out to source for insurance. So how can you help them be proactive and get ahead of that? And then really, understand what the communication practices are in today's world, and help them navigate that. There's a lot of education opportunity there, because buyers sometimes don't have the time to go out and say, you know what, let's just go electronic because that's what everyone's saying, but they don't understand the value of print because they haven't had the time to learn that print has really continued to be a good opportunity for a lot of organizations. So a little summary, this is what we reviewed today, you guys. We went through 12 steps. Start with your customer base. Identify your ideal customer. Know what products the industry you're going to work with buys. Look for that white space in your organization. Pick one industry to start with. Know the challenges and priorities, and then clarify how they communicate with their audience. Learn what their customers want. Identify the decision makers that you'll be working with. List learning resources that you're going to engage with on a regular basis, know how you deliver value, and become that thought leader. So that wraps up that very quick conversation, but hopefully give us some time here to engage in our panel audience. So I'm going to pause for just a moment. And before we get to the panel, Steve, if we want to see, are there any questions with regard to what we just shared?
Nothing has been chatted in, but if anybody would like to chat in a question or raise your hand or actually just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question, we're going to unmute Douglas and Susan and give them an opportunity to join the conversation.
Yes, indeed. So we are very excited to have two kind of different perspectives on print buying, and we're going to let each of them, as Steve said, spend a few minutes, introducing themselves and then talking about their responsibilities and a little bit of an insight of what their organizations do. So Douglas, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure, I can start. My name is Douglas Hodgman. I work at 1517 Media, formerly known as Augsburg Fortress. So we're the publishing house for the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We have roughly 8,700 ELCA churches in the US and Canada that are our customer. We also try to get into other markets, the Presbyterians, the Catholics, the Methodists, with some of the products that we sell. So we're not strictly Lutheran, and we do that with a different imprint within our company. So my job, I'm the director of purchasing at 1517 Media, and my job is to buy many current products, just keep them in print, a lot of that through digital, and then the other bigger part of what we do is all new products. So we probably send somewhere between 150 and 225 new titles to print every year.
Wow. That's a lot of titles. That's a lot of management of inventory as well.
It is.
Great. Well, thank you. We're going to get back to you with a few questions here in just a moment. Susan, is your mic opened?
Can you hear me?
We sure can. Hi.
Great. Hi, I'm Susan Engelhart. I work at Lifetime. We have 152 clubs in the United States and Canada. I'm a senior buyer here in procurement, and I'm in charge of managing our marketing spend, which is around $10 million a year.
Wow. Okay, great. And I did have an opportunity to go see one of your sites over in Bellevue, Washington before they closed that campus down for a little while. Susan, I had an opportunity to talk with both Douglas and Susan prior to our conversation today, and was very curious about both of their businesses. So I did a little bit of homework on that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start with a question, and you think about, and I don't know how often you have new products or services that you have to source, but thinking about a brand new project and having to figure out who to call and how to go about finding the best resources for you. What's the process that you go through to do that? And either one of you can start. I'll let Douglas, if you want to start, then we'll get Susan's comments on that as well.
Sure. I mean, we're primarily a book publisher, but we do many other things. We had VBS programs for years, and so that involved adding little toys to the VBS kit, and so we worked with a lot of suppliers locally, but a lot of the manufacturing would happen in China for those products. Mm-hmm. But as far as print related, we are always looking for that new cover treatment that really make that book cover stand out. So the one example I can have for right now is I really leaned heavily on 4 or 5 of our book printers to get me some new ideas. We really want to launch new titles with brand new covers that really look stunning. And they have come to me with such unique things. New things to the market that, for me anyway, that we used to just do a simple paperback book or hardcover book with basic construction, and they've now come to me with different foil options and UV treatments. So we're launching a new book in about a month and a half that's going to have a moon on it, and they wanted the moon to really stand out. And so what that moon's going to have is like 36 microns of UV coating on top of it to really make it shine. And so but finding that was difficult. So I really had to lean on my suppliers heavily to get their advice. What are they seeing? What new things are being offered to them in their manufacturing environments that they can then offer to us as a new product.
Interesting. So Susan, when you think about that question and how Douglas responded was, he really is dependent on his current suppliers. Do you find it's a similar situation, or are you spending a lot of time online searching for new resources?
It's about 50-50. I do rely on my current vendors. I had a project where we built huge Love Your Life letters that we display at our events for photos. People stand in front of them for photo ops.
Mm-hmm.
And none of my current suppliers could do that the way we needed to. So I leaned on them to give me some other vendor ideas of who I could talk to about producing the letters. And I eventually did find someone who was a fit, but I really, instead of just going online or Googling, I definitely reach out to others to see their advice on who would be a good fit.
Okay, interesting. So in both situations, do you feel that your solution providers, those that are providing the print or the photos, or other people in your industry are kind of who you go to or kind of who you lean on most?
Definitely.
Yeah,
So,
for me as well.
So how often, just out of curiosity, do you each belong to organizations that are within your industry? So we talked a lot about vertical markets. And so are you in organizations within your own industry where you can call on resources there as well?
I'm in a few. I mean, Printing Industry of Minnesota or Midwest is called now, that we've been a part of for a long time. Institute for Supply Chain Management for training and things like that we're members of.
Mm-hmm.
But, I do, like I said, tap really heavily on my suppliers. I've got some other, friends in the industry. So sometimes I will call upon them to get advice, or have they ever encountered this situation and how did they best resolve it? There's a lot of tools at our disposal, but sometimes you're right. You got to search the internet. You got to really look for it.
Okay, that I don't like here. I really don't like to hear you have to spend time on the internet. So Susan, what about you? Are you involved in health organizations, and do you depend on people that have similar responsibilities to you to help navigate some of that?
We have a printing group for women that I belong to, that I enjoy, that I can reach out to those individuals. Otherwise, I too just rely on my strong vendor connections to give me advice on who they would recommend. They outsource a lot of things to different vendors, so they have a good feel on who would be a good fit for something. So I really lean on them.
Good. And that's an interesting segue into another thought we had. I listened to a podcast the other day that was talking about one-stop shop service providers, and there's a lot of chatter about that right now. Is, does it make sense to be a one-stop shop for your companies or your customers, or does it make more sense to specialize in a service or solution and then have either a partnership or let somebody else take on business that you can't do? So in your environment, and Doug, we'll start with you again, do you prefer a one-stop shop, or do you have areas that specialize in different parts of your purchasing needs?
Well, for me, I don't really like the term one-stop shop, because I have a lot of printers that will tell me they can do everything. But then you find out, through quoting or whatever, that they are outsourcing many aspects of that job, whether it's the binding, the cover treatment. If I have a couple book printers that they outsource the smice sewing if the book needs to be smice sewn.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that they're not very competitive because they are outsourcing a lot of things. So for me, what my approach is I try to align, what I really try to do is fully understand all of my suppliers' core competencies. And then I try to align my book projects or my new projects with that core competency, so that I can yield the best result. Anytime we have a new title going to press, we quote with 4 or 5 suppliers that we know and trust quite well.
Okay.
We do offer other suppliers to quote on things, oftentimes as well, because we're always looking for something new. 10 years ago, digital wasn't so big for books. And now, I've got more suppliers than I can handle. So
Right.
There's only so much, you can send out. But for me, the one-stop shop thing, it never resonates very well, because I know I grew up in printing. I ran printing presses for 20 years. And, you can try to be everything to everybody, but the fact is a lot of times you have to outsource.
Absolutely. Susan, what's been your experience with that term?
I agree. I do have a vendor that can do direct mail, large format, collateral, but my other items, I do make sure that they're keeping it all in-house. I definitely don't want to pay more for someone to outsource. The only situation I would allow that is more like a promotional, items are almost always outsourced, obviously. I have a specific vendor for membership cards and gift cards. And then my large format direct mail, I have a specific vendor. So I have buckets of vendors that I use for certain things.
Right. So I'm going to bring you both to my next strategy workshops, because I'm going to upset a few people that in our industry, because I know that a lot of people are trying to build their reputation on one-stop shops, but I couldn't agree with you more that it's a very evasive term that really doesn't demonstrate value. So we always try to work around that on one-stop shop value proposition and say something more meaningful to the client, and then really understand if the customer even likes that term. And I think that's the most important part, is understanding, for those of you that have responsibility of your marketing spend or your manufacturing spend, is that meaningful to you? And if it's not, let's quit using that term out there. So very, very helpful. Thank you for that. So again, we talked about some of the studies out there in sales, and I do a lot of research on sales behavior and sales enablement. And one of the studies that stood out, back 8-9 years ago, was one by the Challenger Sales Group, the corporate executive board, and they said simply that those salespeople that bring new ideas to their clients are those that are winning more business, and those that are always earning the trust of their customers and getting the meetings that they need to have in order to build those relationships. So thinking about that and thinking about one of your current providers, do either one of you have an example of where somebody brought you an idea that really made either life easier for you, maybe it impacted your supply chain, or maybe it made the product better? Douglas, you were talking about some, some embellishment type work. Do either one of you have an example of where a salesperson was responsible for helping you in your business operations?
I mean, I'll continue on with the one, but because it's so recent, the book it's not completed yet. I reached out to several of our printers, and 3 or 4 of them came to me with ideas. What's really helpful is when they can send samples.
Okay.
Get that sample in our hands so that we can actually see what that, foil stamping looks like, or if they're using some other special cover treatment like a, UV coating. So through the sample that I received of that UV coating generated the idea to put it on this particular book. And that won that vendor the book. I mean, they had won it through the quoting anyway, but we have 5 or 6 vendors that can do this type of book, and the difference was pretty minimal between them. So the one that came to me with that great idea is the one that was going to get that. Excellent. So even if I had to pay 10 or 15 cents more per unit, because I'm buying 3,000 copies of a book, it doesn't turn into a lot of dollars.
Right.
But no one else came to me with that. Some of them came with these rainbow different stickers and different things you could put on there, but that really wasn't what we were looking for. So, but in my career, we had a book that needed a little plastic pocket in the back. And so I worked with 3 or 4 vendors to figure out who could do that for us and how could they put that into the back of the book. And so it worked out quite well, but it was a vendor, a newer supplier to me, coming to me with the idea saying, hey, we could do it this way or this way. And then they give you some different costs on what it would be to add that particular element.
Mm-hmm. I think the interesting part there, Douglas, is what you said, and I hope that the people that are listening in today heard it as well, is it wasn't the person with the lowest price that won your trust in business, right? It was the person that brought you a better practice, a better product.
Right.
And
now, if that embellishment would have been not affordable, then it probably wouldn't have mattered as much, but it was affordable, and so it really won them that job.
Excellent. What about in your environment, Susan? Do you often have great salespeople that come in with good ideas?
My example is similar to, we love techniques on our book, on our large direct mail pieces, and we always do soft touch varnish on the cover to make it just have that tactile feel. We want something a little bit different for a new spa piece, and so I reached out to a vendor and asked for some new ideas. She quickly put together some techniques for us, glitter and spot UV. And since everyone's working, a lot of people are working from home, she couriered it right over to the creative director for her to review and redesign the piece. So it's just, you know, that once again, getting that sample in front of you. And then if the price is a little bit more, I would still give it to that vendor just because they did all the hard work figuring out what we want and going above and beyond than everyone else who I would bid it with.
That's great. So again, I think the message here is that, you know, the people out there responsible for the budgets of marketing and manufacturing products, they're not mean people. They just need your help, and they're going to award the right person the business based on that relationship and what you can bring to the table. You both mentioned samples, and I'm curious to find out is the type of sample, so does a sample need to be one of your products, or does it matter if it's a sample that's relevant to your industry, or is it very important that that sample represent your industry?
Susan, I'll let you go first if you want.
No, yeah, we just want to see it.
Okay.
Everyone here is very visual, and a lot of people don't have the experience in print, so they just visually need to see it. If I say, you know, do you want a glitter UV coating, I want to be able to show it to them. They don't care. You know, on occasion I have to do our own mock-ups and samples, but that's very rare. Usually, as long as we see a sample from someone else, that's fine for us.
Great.
I agree completely with that. Our designers, we have in-house designers, and we have some freelance that we do as well, but our in-house designers and our project managers, they're very visual people. They want to see what is it going to look like. It doesn't absolutely have to be our product. Obviously, if they can do that, it's wonderful, but that's pretty rare, unless you can just send them a test file and you get like a cover back, which we've done, but it's really helpful just to see that sample so we can see what is it going to look like, physically look like in print on that piece of paper. So
excellent. Good. Well, and that's helpful because I think for many years I have always kind of instructed salespeople that, you know, make sure that the sample is relevant to the environment you're selling to, but maybe a better way of looking at that is make sure the sample represents something that would be important to them in their printing practices. So it's a very, very good feedback from both of you. So again, talking a little bit more about the sales people, and it's a two-part question. So let's talk about your current vendors, your current suppliers right now, your current salespeople. We looked at the insurance industry and the fact that they like to have engagement, insurance buyers like to have engagement after they've made that decision. You know, how do you prefer to engage? Let's say you have a current vendor and they want to bring you a new idea. You're not in a buying cycle right now, but they want to bring you a new idea. What's the best way for them to engage with you? Is that through an appointment or email, or you know, how do you like to engage with your current suppliers?
Susan, you want to go or do you want me to go?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Usually I prefer email and then set up a time to meet with them. Don't call my cell phone continuously. It's my big thing. I have a sales rep who all he does is he'll call my cell phone 3 times in a row. And I'm not going to answer it just because he's annoying me.
I'm surprised he's still on your list.
I'm surprised as well. For me, we're never out of a buying cycle. We send new products to press every month.
Okay.
I mean, because we do so many. This year, we are probably going to send somewhere closer to 300. So if you think about that and the printers that we're doing with, I mean, it's not even per week. It's new titles going out every day.
Right.
So for me, I'm in contact with my core suppliers daily for the most part. But if they're going to come in, like a lot of our suppliers will come in for a visit once a quarter, an in-person visit, and then they bring me my new samples and anything special at that time. But if I'm in the middle of a new project and I need some ideas, then we send it via, you know, FedEx, UPS, whatever, get that sample in-house right away. But as far as communicating with me, email is usually the best.
Okay.
I rarely get phone calls. Usually if it's a phone call, it's because there's an issue. So I'm glad I don't get a lot of phone calls.
Okay. What about text? Do you like text at all from your suppliers?
I don't use text with the suppliers, no.
No. Susan?
No.
No. Isn't it funny? It's kind of that personal fine line.
I'm with emergency situations, but I don't want to communicate on a daily basis with them via text.
Very good to know. So shifting gears, we talked about your current suppliers, and I'm glad to hear they come in on a quarterly basis. We always try to encourage sales organizations to have quarterly reviews with their clients to make sure that they're staying ahead of whatever changes might be occurring in their environment, and then also just to remind them of all the great things you've done together, and it's very helpful for everybody. But let's think about somebody that you've not worked with before, and it's not a referral. They haven't come to you as a referral, but they're just trying to get your business. And let's say they're not calling your cell phone 3 times in a row, Susan, but if somebody is really, being very professional and they're trying to reach you, what's the best way or what's the best practice for a salesperson to reach out and gain your attention? Susan, I'll start with you.
Usually they'll send an email introduction and I will ask them to send me information about their company. If it's send it through the mail, send me a packet, some samples, and I will add them to our list of vendors when we're going to open it up for bidding.
Okay, perfect. And Douglas?
Very, very similar. What I do is I ask them for an equipment list first so I can see what they have under their roof.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, and then I try to, again, line my products. I really want to vet out their core competency. I don't want them quote, if they're not a printer that can do what we need them to do, it doesn't really pay to have them quoting on a bunch of things. I've had suppliers over the years call me numerous times begging for work, promising me they're going to save me money. And I always take offense to the saving me money thing because they're basically telling me that I'm not doing my job. But so I would discourage anyone to use that term that's on this webinar right now, because it does not, no print buyer is going to appreciate that comment. What's really going to help me save me money is if you can show me something new, tell me that you're staying in touch with technology, that you've added new equipment, you're using digital printing. So much of what we do right now is digitally printed. It's just amazing. We went from, just a few titles that way to probably 60-70% of our titles are done digitally.
Wow. That's a tremendous leap, and that also, I'm going to move aside here, it also supports one of the areas that we've done in our research as far as where the growth is coming from in digital, and books obviously was the highest application out there, so it does support some of the research that we do as well. But you both said something interesting that I want to follow up on, and that is how to engage with you. What if, or I guess better said, how much does let's say a brand new vendor supplier trying to get your attention, how much does a case study or a reference come into play in how you respond to them? And Susan, I'll let you go with that one again first.
I think that definitely helps. And a lot of vendors reach out to me saying they're a member of our club and they want to get their foot in the door. We obviously respond to those individuals, but it's usually a reference would mean more to me than just someone who belongs to our clubs.
Okay. And Douglas, what about your situation?
For me, I think a case study would help. Reference if I'm actually going to consider letting them quote, because I might send out some quotes just to get a feel for their pricing and to see if they're even in line with our other printers that we're using right now. A case study would be wonderful just to know a little bit more about them. But really, it's just getting to know them and tell me what you do and what you do well. And the one-stop shop thing there's when I get turned off, and if they're calling repeatedly, then same thing. I will definitely let you quote if I've said I would. But sometimes it takes a few weeks. We buy so far out that quoting a new product or giving a new printer an opportunity to quote a product for me today would probably be a July release.
Wow. Okay.
So
having to be very, very proactive. So when you think about the ways that people can buy print, and there's certainly some opportunities to buy online, do any of your vendors, and Douglas, we'll start with you on this one, do any of your suppliers or print partners offer you an online portal? And if they don't, would you use it if they did?
We do have 3 that let us buy online. Our primary one is a very big print-on-demand supplier, Lightning Source. When I started with 1517 Media back in 2005, we had 22 titles with them. Today we're at over 2,000.
Oh my gosh.
So I go online and I buy print from them. Now print on demands are sent through EDI. But I actually buy short run digital printing from them as well, and I go online to do that.
Good. And if you were to be presented with a company exactly like them that didn't have that portal, would you choose based on the ease of use of doing business with them, or does that matter? Does that play into your decision-making factor and who to use?
No, that doesn't play into it at all. It's easy to use. I don't have to get involved with the sales rep there, and I can cut a PO and have this thing going in minutes versus sending it out for a quote, because it's all predetermined pricing based on page count and trim size. So the portal's nice and it's easy, but it's very cookie cutter. It has to fit exactly what you're looking for, right?
Okay.
So you can set up new titles or you can buy existing titles.
Okay.
But as far as orders go for like POD, with the 2,000 titles that we have in that POD arena, it's all hands off. It's all automated. Customers order it and it goes right to them. They manufacture it, ship it to the customer. The invoicing happens behind the scenes as well. So it's hands off for me. Setting up new titles and quoting or buying short run digitals, a little bit more hands on.
Okay.
But I use it, and I use it with 2 other printers as well.
So it speaks to supply chain opportunity there. Susan, what about in your situation? Do you have online buying practices?
We do. We have one vendor who has all of our online marketing, a majority of print on demand and inventoried items. So we can go on there and have the clubs order the materials they need for their supplies. And we update those on an ongoing basis, obviously.
Okay. So again, kind of following up with what I asked Douglas is, if you had the choice of buying from that supplier or somebody else that didn't have an online portal, would that be a key factor in your decision on how you approach that business?
Not at all. For us, we're a not-for-profit company, so quality, customer service, delivery, and price are our top 4 things. So if they're have an online portal that's easy, but they charge more, I'm not going to buy from them.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're a little bit, someone did just approach me recently. We thought about changing vendors for our online marketing, but it turned out to be, while they could save me money, it was getting to be, I was worried about their turn times and their customer service. So I was willing to keep it where it was at. I did negotiate my pricing down with that vendor, but I kept it where it's at with a little bit higher price point, just because I know they can meet our needs.
Very smart, very smart. So I'm excited. We've got a question that just came in from the audience, and I'm going to read this so that I get it right. And I'll have Susan, you start first, and then we'll have Douglas follow up with that. The question is, has there been a sales rep that stood out where they surprised you with their understanding of your business? And if so, how did they represent that knowledge?
I definitely have sales reps who, for me, it's probably different than Douglas, obviously. A lot of the sales reps are familiar with Lifetime and understand our business needs. They see our marketing in the club, they get our direct mail. So they understand what we want and how we want to stand out and look high end. So they'll come to me with new high end options. And it's mainly just from them being members of the club and being in the club and understanding what we want.
Great. Very smart.
Over the years, I've had several that have stood out. There's one, a local printer in Minnesota that we use here quite often. They do such a fabulous job for us. They know our business as much as we do. So, if there's a project that we're ordering and something's different about it from the last couple of times, they question that. And, so that kind of customer service is really important. Maybe there's a reason for that change, but there's been a few times, at one time I had 7 buyers that reported to me because of things that we've changed over the years and scaled back. I have far fewer than that, but new people make mistakes. And if they send over a purchase order for something that they're ordering 10,000 when they normally order 1,000, they might say, hey, wait a minute, I'd love to have the order, but something looks wrong here. So sales reps like that really help out. And we have really, really good suppliers. There might be one printer in there that I don't quote as much with because they're a little bit hard to work with, or they're just not that great resource for me, but they come through. Printers' jobs for both, I hope Susan would agree with this, they need to make us shine. They need to really make us look like we made a great decision using them. And I would say our sales reps know that, and they protect that quite well.
That's great. That's great. Very good responses. And I just love the insights that we're getting from a sales perspective, because we think we know all the time what people in your situation needs are, and to hear it a little differently in your words and from your environment is very helpful, I think, to, at least for me, and I'm hoping as well the other people that have joined us today. So any other questions, Steve, that you see coming in from the group out there?
Nothing else from me right now from the group. If and you know, I also want to kind of open it up to anyone who saw something in in Karen's presentation, because we did go through a lot of tremendous facts and figures. And you know, everybody has it in your email box. If you haven't looked, we did send that out in advance right before the meeting, so you have Karen's presentation. But if there's anything particular that you had questions about, whether it's how to work with Dun & Bradstreet, or how do you really work that Excel spreadsheet that she was talking about, if there's any other information you think you might want to gather from that research that Karen presented, please chat in those questions as well, or any particular questions to Susan and Doug.
Yep. So, and that kind of brings up another good question to Susan and Douglas, is that, you know, that chart that I did demonstrate as far as customer spend and gaining more customer spend from a service provider standpoint. So if they provide, let's say, book covers and, you know, certain things that you need, Douglas, in your environment, I'll start with you first. If they came to you and said, you know, I realize you're doing some other work and you're not doing it with us, you know, what's your thought on an approach to that? And I guess the question I'm trying to get to is, why wouldn't you change and do it with somebody that can do it and minimize the number of vendors you work with? Would there be a good reason for that?
Well, for us, it's all about, you know, really, again, save it because we're not for profit. We don't have deep pockets as a company. We really need to keep our company as solvent as possible. We quote out every new project, and so what we try to work with is vendors that we really know and trust. We've vetted them out. We know their core competencies. We align the product with that core competency, and then we let the numbers speak for themselves. If a vendor's not giving me good service, good price, good quality, good delivery, they tend to fall to the bottom. So the vendors that are really standing out for me are the ones that are doing exactly that. Price becomes the last thing you need to think about, because they're giving me great service, they're giving me great quality. You know, on-time delivery is very key to us. We sell a lot of books to Amazon, and I don't know if too many people in this industry understand the ins and outs of working with Amazon, but it's quite tricky, and especially with new titles. So if we have a new title that's going to release on, say, April 2nd, and that title doesn't make it into our warehouse on time, we get fined for that. So Amazon dings you back, chargebacks for late shipments, and you can't have out of stock situations. It's difficult to manage them. They're our largest customer, but they're also the toughest customer that we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to service them on their terms, because they don't have to buy from us.
True. And that kind of goes back to the message that I was sharing of, you know, really understand how your customer, this is for salespeople, understand how people like you, Douglas, and you, Susan, make your money or get fined, right? So it's really understanding how that whole clockwork works. I shared, when I first met Steve, I shared a story about Costco. I was selling equipment at the time, and we were selling variable data software with the equipment, and Costco happens to be in my backyard. And so I gained access to the marketing team because I wanted to approach them with a new idea about personalization. You know, the top 5 or 10% of their buyers in the warehouses, and, you know, why aren't we doing more personalization? And it was a very embarrassing situation because I didn't do my homework. And what I learned was, when I went to talk about personalization to the members, the marketing people told me I clearly did not know their business model, because they don't make their money on the floor. They make their money in memberships.
Mm-hmm.
But they were willing to talk about how to get more memberships, and that was really their drive and what they're trying to do. But you said it as well, as, you know who your customers are doing business with and how that has to happen in order to make it work well for everybody. And I think that is a very, very overlooked, because as salespeople, we're charged with so many different responsibilities that sometimes you forget to ask that one last question that can really clarify things and help you as a partner provide better solutions and services to people like yourself and Susan. So, you know, Susan, I don't know if you want to respond to how Douglas responded to the question or not, but certainly would love to hear your voice on on what's important to you as far as the overall experience, I guess, from a sales organization.
I think you could have a great sales rep, but if you don't have a good customer service person who supports that sales rep, I just want to make sure to mention that. I've worked with some people who it's a great sales rep, but the customer service person's lacking, and that makes me not want to work with them as well. So it's really important the person who's on feet on the ground in the shop, they're the ones who are really getting things done for you.
Excellent. So what I've taken away so far is that salespeople should not phone somebody 3 times to try to get their attention. Do not use the term one-stop shop, and do not put in your value proposition that you are going to save them money. I think those are very, very wise takeaways for all of us. And I'll go back to Susan to start with. Is there anything else? And that was very helpful to understand the balance between the salesperson and customer service. Is there anything else that you could advise the audience today, the group that's joined us, on what's important as they approach new opportunities in business like yours out there?
I think just don't be overly aggressive, but continue to, obviously we're very busy, so just continue to drop in and say hi, or, check in with email, say hi, do you need anything? Is there a project I can estimate on? But not call someone on their cell phone 3 times. Would be my tip.
Yeah, I've never had the cell phone one, but my advice would be very clear about what you can do. Don't try to mislead us, because we will find out that you're not able to do that. It will only be a matter of time. So for me, let me know what you do and what you do well. I will find projects that feed into that if I value you as a supplier. And if I can onboard you, I'm not going to onboard somebody for one job. If I'm going to bring a new supplier on, it's because I think they're going to be able to do a lot of work for us. In our portfolio, we have over 3,500 titles. Like I said, 2,000 of those are print on demand. So those really don't get quoted out. They're just one-offs. You don't make a book until you sell a book. But for the inventory that's in our warehouse that we're buying and reprinting, and then the new stuff that's coming out, I need to know exactly what you do as a supplier. Help me understand your core competency, and I will feed projects into that core competency. And that's where you're going to be successful. Because if you're quoting outside of that core competency, you're not going to win them anyway.
Excellent. That's very sound advice. And as I thought we were kind of wrapping up the conversation with very nice summaries from both of you, thank you. We did get another question. Susan, this is for you about omni-channel marketing. And it says, is omni-channel marketing a significant marketing strategy for Lifetime? And if so, have you found value in your print service providers in serving those needs, or are you using other industry sectors to manage your database and digital needs?
Great question. We currently are not using our print suppliers for those needs. Obviously, they've pitched it to us. We do a ton social, email, database marketing, and we do have separate vendors for those. I have approached the team with my print suppliers who've reached out to me to say they have that ability, but they don't want to work with them at this point. Now, I don't know if down the road we'll address it again, but they have their own suppliers they like to use, and I don't manage that business. So I just give them a recommendation and let them go from there on that.
Very smart. Good question. Very good question. Okay, Steve, I'm going to go back to you and see if there's any additional questions, and if you wanted to bring this all home.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Karen. I thought it was a terrific discussion and informative research that you presented initially. I did actually ask that last question about the omni-channel, and I was a little distressed at the answer, and I know that many salespeople are as well. It's because all of that work is really done by multiple people in your operation, Susan, and when someone actually has those omni-channel capabilities, and they're doing one channel with you, and they all of a sudden need a new relationship with someone else in your operation, I know it becomes very complicated and it's difficult for all concerned. But I think that's the shift that we're in, and that's why this is not a game for the faint of heart. But I hopefully we're going to see more and more integration in how those channels are connected. So anyway, I don't have any other questions being chatted in, and so I just want to thank you both for being on the panel. Susan and Doug, really appreciate your expertise. Karen, appreciate yours. And Karen, one last thing, if you could share with people, we did send out the URL for the survey. So give people just a second about what that survey is all about, and if they fill it out, how they're going to benefit.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned it in late 2016, it was published in 2017. We did a best practices of sales organizations in the print service industry. And we've got a lot of great insight from that as far as what the leading sales teams are doing. And as we've learned, and it'd be interesting to get both of our panelists' feedback on this, as we've learned that the buyer's journey starts long before they engage with the salesperson, if it's an initial product, that marketing plays a key role in the sales success as well in today's world. And so we've relaunched the survey under 2020 Marketing and Sales Best Practices. And in the survey, it takes about 10 minutes, and we ask questions that are relevant to are print service providers using search engine optimization? How are they managing their leads? Do they have a process in place? And then we talk a lot about the sales best practices as well. So our objective is to just put together a series of best practices for those that are growing in the industry. The survey has been out for about 5 days now in various different groups that we have, and we anticipate having over probably 150 different respondents, which is really good in today's world of survey fatigue. So we're excited that people are interested in the topic. And as a takeaway, while we won't be publishing the entire survey and all the data, we will provide, if you send me your email, an executive summary, or Steve, I can send it to you as well, and you can circulate that with your members there as well. So high-level executive summary with a couple key takeaways.
Fantastic. So we will be getting that executive summary. So you can watch that from us. So please fill out that survey. You should have had it in your email already, along with the presentation and 2 separate emails sent from Chris Davis this morning. So anyway, any last words from Susan or Doug?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do this. It was fun. I do get suppliers in all the time just asking questions, and then the new ones, how can we do work with you? So hopefully we've answered some of that today.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for attending, and we look for you on our next Smart Cafe. Thanks.
Thanks all.
Thank you.